Joining me now is Michael Beschloss. He is NBC News presidential historian, and I want to ask him about that. Is this the kind of historical moment, Michael, where a president can really leave his mark?
Sure it is. And, there are some historical echoes. You were talking about history. Sometimes a president can look in history and find a little bit of guidance at a moment like this. Let me mention two. 1953, Iran, the Shah was driven off his throne. There was a leader named Mossadegh who was a reformer. The United States feared that he was too pro-communist and that he might do some anti-American things. They staged a counter coup, brought the Shah back to power, and the result was that we had a reliable government for about 3 decades, but needless to say, no reform. And finally, that led to the government we now have in Iran. The opposite case would be Ronald Reagan in 1986. Ferdinand Marcos had been essentially the dictator of the Philippines since the mid-1960s. There was a wave of support for Corazon Aquino, reform candidate. The generals were wavering. Ronald Reagan, if you observe the caricature, you might think that he might have supported Marcos. The Cold War was still on. Philippines were very important to our defense. Instead, he sent his closest friend in the Senate, Paul Laxalt, to call on Marcos, to talk to him, and he said, cut clean. Essentially, Americans are not going to support you anymore. 16 hours later, Marcos was out. Reagan did the right thing.
So that's interesting. So do we learn from history that perhaps going for our short-term gains, Mubarak is an ally, he's kept the peace with Israel, etc., might be outweighed by our long-term American ideals? I mean, Iran seems to be an excellent case of that. Is that right? Is that throughout history been the same lesson?
I think more often than not, and particularly with this president, as you know, Barack Obama during the campaign of 2008 spoke very specifically about the fact that he wanted to go to an Arab capital and make a speech about democracy. That was a campaign promise kept. June of 2009, of all things, he went to Cairo and spoke of the need for democracy in the Middle East. So, if you want that from a president, you've got the right guy in the White House at the moment.
Look, he made the great speech when it was theoretical. Now it's real. Now it's practical. And to be fair to President Obama, he's definitely been edging away from Mubarak. He said that an orderly transition must begin now. I'm not sure that statement is going to echo through time. But on the other hand, did other great leaders like Lincoln hedge many times before they delivered the Gettysburg Address in Lincoln's case?
Oftentimes they do. I mean, John Kennedy, for instance, his first 2 years of office would have liked to make peace with the Russians. Only after the Cuban Missile Crisis did he have the strength and stature to get a test ban treaty. That usually happens. But what I'd be fascinated to know, Cenk, is what Frank Wisner, President Obama's envoy, actually told Mubarak the other day. My guess is that it went a little bit beyond what we've heard from the president in public.
All right, one last question for you, because you're right, there must be behind-the-scenes efforts here pressuring President Mubarak. But is it also important to come out and tell the public, whether it's the Egyptian protesters, our people, etc., hey, listen, I'm going to be very clear on this. I'm on the side of democracy, freedom, and American ideals. Do you think that's very important for a president as the leader of the free world to do?
Absolutely vital. And, it goes all the way back to Jefferson, the contagion of democracy. The times when we've really gotten into trouble as Americans have been when we strayed from those ideals. So I think Barack Obama has very much got that message.
All right, Michael Beschloss, NBC News presidential historian. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Pleasure.